Earlier today, Donald Trump made waves when he abruptly and inexplicably canceled an interview with a program led by one of the biggest MAGA supporters in media. And that MAGA host was visibly disappointed when he talked about it on air. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, this is pretty big news. Again, Donald Trump has been on a spree of canceling appearances and interviews and forums in which he could potentially face adversarial questions. That's why he refused to debate Vice President Kamala Harris, even on Fox News. Fox News had to pay nearly $800 million in a defamation settlement because they knowingly signal boosted Donald Trump's lies. Well, he's now drawing further attention to his obvious cognitive decline by canceling a CNBC interview on Squawk Box, which is hosted in part by one of the biggest MAGA hosts in media, Joe Kernen. And Joe Kernen was pretty disappointed when he talked about it on camera.
Well, you should talk her into coming on. And you said you've tried.
You're going to be nice to her?
Well, Trump canceled, and he was going to come on. And I said, when you come on, we'll be able to say you came, and I didn't talk to him personally, but I said, yeah, we've offered the vice president, and she's not coming on, but you are. Now he's canceled. So now she could come on, and we could say we offered it. Trump can't, but they're not.
All right. Can Becky ask the questions?
I think you might. I think you might like Andrew. I think you might like Andrew posing those questions. He's got some good ones. How do you do it?
Charles, thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks.
So you can see the disappointment on Joe Kernen's face. I mean, he is really upset. That's the MAGA host in question. We've talked about him before. I mean, he is one of the most prolific Trump supporters in media that's not on Newsmax or Fox News. This was going to be a softball interview if Kernen had his way. But Trump canceled. And again, as part of a pattern, as we get closer and closer to the election, and again, to properly contextualize this, I want you to remember. So as Judge Legum points out, Trump canceled the 60 Minutes interview, a 50-year presidential candidate tradition, canceled it. Number two, refused to participate in the Fox News moderated debate, and then the CNN moderated debate, even though he praised CNN for their moderation of his debate, against President Biden. But it wasn't good enough to debate Kamala Harris a second time. He cut off, a recent Q&A led by MAGA Republican Governor Kristi Noem. He just abruptly canceled it after being an hour late and just awkwardly stood on stage for 40 minutes while music played and then canceled the CNBC interview. This is part of a pattern. As Kamala Harris's campaign and the spokespeople are pointing out, what's wrong with Donald Trump? What's going on? I mean, it's important to remember, for context too, that the polls show that a majority of Americans do not believe that Donald Trump is physically and mentally fit to be president. You can say, well, that's just the polls. Fair enough, but that's the perception, and it is a potential game-changing obstacle that Trump has to face. Now, I would argue it's a perception well established in fact. Donald Trump is a stupid man, and he was stupid back in 2016. He was stupid in 2020, but he's stupider now than he was then, right? His baseline was pretty low to begin with, and now he's the oldest presidential candidate in American history. He is incapable of answering direct questions directly and substantively. He filibusters. He changes the topic. He employs non sequitur. He has to be, in multiple interviews that we've covered, very often dragged back to the question by friendly handlers in the form of Sean Hannity and other conservative, hosts on Fox and Newsmax and elsewhere, trying to help him out. And he still fumbles and face plants. Is this not indicative of an ongoing problem with Trump? And again, people are drawing attention to it. Pod Save America host Tommy Vitor is talking about this. This is now getting very suspicious. Joe Kernen, is one of the biggest Trump supporters / ass kissers on TV. Canceling an interview with him suggests Trump is struggling to do anything besides DJ at rallies. This is something that Vice President Harris and her campaign in rallies or at rallies and at speeches are actually highlighting. They're emphasizing. They're going out of their way to try to draw the contrast. And remember, to contextualize this, Vice President Harris has agreed to be interviewed by the Fox Propaganda Network. She has agreed to be interviewed by Bret Baier, the same Bret Baier, who, even though he has the veneer of being a respectable journalist, was trying to get Fox to not call Arizona for President Biden in 2020, even though Arizona was won by President Biden. because Brett Baier was worried that Fox would lose viewership to OAN and Newsmax, that the MAGA cult would be so mad at them that they would look away and go get their business elsewhere. A man who is perfectly willing to sacrifice journalistic integrity. Vice President Harris has agreed magnanimously, I would argue, and perhaps foolishly. There is a debate about this high-stakes interview, whether it's a good idea or not, but none can deny that it's brave. The vice president is courageously agreeing to be interviewed by a man who has been a bad faith actor in the past on a network that is so bad faith, unprecedentedly bad faith, that they had to pay $787 million to Dominion Voting Systems to settle a defamation case. That's how she is walking into the lion's den, proverbially. And in contrast, what's Donald Trump doing? Canceling even softball interviews such that he is visibly disappointing the MAGA host in question. I think that this is incontrovertible proof, or further incontrovertible proof of what we've seen from Trump over the years, that this is a stupid man who is now a stupid man in the throes of cognitive decline. I'll also remind you, Media Matters did an analysis of this back when President Biden was still the presumptive Democratic nominee. By a 10-to-1 ratio, so-called mainstream media, so not just right-wing media like the Wall Street Journal and Fox News, but even the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, by a 10-to-1 ratio, there were more op-eds and more coverage of Biden's cognitive decline compared to Trump's. So even in, again, a wildly asymmetrical media environment, which grades him on a curve, factually, it's not a matter of opinion. It is an established fact. Donald Trump is still retreating. What does that say about him? What does it say about his campaign? The questions that MAGA Republicans and so-called centrists were posing about President Biden. Oh, why is he campaigning from the basement? Why don't they have him out more? Why don't they have Trump out more? Do these questions not apply to Trump? Are we not holding people to the same standard? Obviously not, but we should. Again, I think a lot is going to be made of Trump's decision to cancel the CNBC interview, and we should also contribute to that. We should make sure that people are aware that he is so afraid and his handlers are so afraid of how stupid and incompetent he is that they are even unwilling to put him in front of Joe Kernen. Joe Kernen, who again is one of the biggest MAGA supporters outside of Fox News. This is a scandal. It's already making, the waves. People are commenting about it on social media. I have no doubt that attention will be drawn to it in legacy media as well. And that's good, because for once we should start imposing the same standard on Trump that Trump tries to impose on everybody else. One standard for everyone, because the fact of the matter is Trump can't live up to that standard. He never could. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.